Okay, well, we might kick off. Wanted to say a big hello and welcome to all of you who've joined us this evening for our webinar. It's really great that you could join us for what we feel is a really important topic. We'll be discussing how to build your child's mental fitness to tackle anxiety. My name is Belinda Elworthy, and I'm the CEO here at Gotcha4Life, and I'll be your host for this evening's webinar. So during this session, we'll be exploring a little bit more about how to understand anxiety and the signs that we might recognize in our children. We'll be talking about ways to help our children build their mental fitness to really foster inner confidence and calm. And we're excited to also discuss and share with you some really practical tools that you can help to support your children and maybe even support yourself. So before I introduce you to our incredible guest tonight, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. Gotcha4Life acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live, and connect. We honour the strength and resilience of First Nations peoples and their profound practices in community, in care, and in healing. At Gotcha4Life, we are guided by the wisdom of Australia's First Nations peoples, and we strive to build culturally respectful mental fitness frameworks that foster strong and connected communities. We pay our respects to elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Okay, I'm really thrilled to introduce you to our guest this evening. Jodie Lowinger, Dr. Jodie Lowinger is a Gotcha4Life ambassador, Gotcha4Life clinical advisor. Jodie is a clinical psychologist, a best-selling author, and founder and CEO of the Anxiety Clinic. And the Anxiety Clinic supports children and teens all across Australia in person and via telehealth sessions. So I can't think of a more fitting person to be joining us tonight to talk about this topic. Welcome, Jodie, and thank you so much.
Hi, Belle. It's such a joy to be here, and connect with parents. It's an area that I'm so incredibly passionate about as a mum of 3 and as a clinical psychologist. So to be able to connect with you, to build mental fitness in our community is an absolute pleasure.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump straight into it so we can get really start cracking on all of these questions. The first question I'd love to talk to you more about is as a parent, and I'm a parent as well with 3 boys at home, what do you think it's important to know about anxiety, and how might we see it show up in our children?
Anxiety is part of being human. And so what we want to do is take anxiety out of this clinical pocket where we feel that there's something wrong with us and bring it into a human frame and recognize it's probably one of the most fundamental parts of who we are as human beings. It's our primitive survival instinct. It's our ability for our brain to send messages to our body to self-protect, to fight or to run in situations where there is a real threat. The challenge with the life that we're living in is there's so much uncertainty in our surroundings, and uncertainty is one of our most fundamental threats, because as humans, we want to be able to predict what's going on in our environment to prepare ourselves and to protect ourselves from anything bad happening. So what happens is anxiety gets triggered in certain situations. And I like to sort of keep things very simple and think about the clustering of these situations. Social situations, which is social uncertainty, such as what if they judge me negatively? What if they don't like me? And this is particularly relevant in our kids and teens. Performance anxiety or performance uncertainty, such as what if I make a mistake? What if I fail? So these are the what ifs, which is worry taking hold in our mind. And then the third cluster is around health and well-being. What if something bad happens to me? or to a loved one? What if something bad happens to mum or dad? And so this can trigger some health-related anxiety. Separation anxiety oftentimes is how it presents within our children. And so we can recognize this in all of us to various levels of severity. In our children, it plays out or presents itself in many different ways. One of the common ways that it presents can be somatic, what's called somatic kind of experiences. That really just means things showing up in our children's bodies, tummy aches, headaches, just not feeling good. And so it might be, mummy or daddy, I've got a tummy ache, I don't feel good. And as adults, we kind of know it's those butterfly kind of experiences because anxiety is our physiological reaction. It's the adrenaline, it's the cortisol. So physical complaints can happen, and physical can also escalate into not sleeping well. Again, we as adults can relate to some of these experiences, right? And that makes sense because it's adrenaline and cortisol in our children's bloodstream. And the last thing we do when we've got that adrenaline is sleep. Nightmares, these sorts of things can play out. Worry thoughts, so some of these emotional kinds of experiences as well. Frustration, agitation, anger, short fuse to distress. So let's recognize that there are many faces of anxiety because it is the fight or flight or freeze reaction. And so then there's the behavioral representations, behavioral things such as avoidance. Again, we can recognize this in us as adults. Children are just younger adults, let's say. So we want to take on a really respectful approach to our children's experiences. But one of the key messages, and there's so many other ways that this can present, avoidance being a key element to this, and worry thoughts. Key message is these are all really helpable. For whatever level of severity your children are experiencing, there's the anxiety that we experience simply as being human, or our kids and teens. And then we can talk about clinical anxiety, or what I'm always reticent to use is the D word, disorder. I hate that word because we don't want to stigmatize or for our kids to feel like there's something wrong with them. Because if anything, it's really this kind, this deep sense of empathy, this beautiful analytical mind that is often part of the human experience of anxiety. But if you're finding that anxiety is impacting your children to a level of severity that it's causing prolonged fear, suffering or avoidance in their life, this might be tipping into what we might call clinical anxiety. But certainly at the anxiety clinic, the strategies and the tools that we use to help all people are the tools that we use no matter what level of severity anxiety is playing out, because these are mental fitness tools that can really help every single person. And so it's a real joy to be able to have an opportunity to share some of these with you tonight.
Thanks, Jodie. I really love the way you've talked about, how important it is to normalize feelings of anxiety. And I think, even just reflecting on my own parenting experience, it's often we'll pick up on the behaviors. So, our kids might be, extra snappy, or they might start picking on their younger brother or sister, or they might say, I'm not going to that place anymore. They might try and withdraw. And often, we react just as we would kind of like, what's going on? Or why are you behaving this way? Because it may trigger something in ourselves, and how powerful it can be, I guess, just to initially recognize that something might be going on for them if their behavior is presenting in this way. Is this something that you, I guess, when you're seeing parents coming into the clinic and reaching out for you, um, how important is it to be able to recognize those signs and to give them a bit of space, before we start to get too worried ourselves?
Yeah, I think parents can feel kind of overwhelmed and disempowered. In society, we put so much pressure on ourselves that we've just got to get it right. And so we second guess ourselves, like, am I doing the right thing by doing this? Or am I, and then we get caught up in our own worry stories around what to do. I think ultimately, for parents to lean in and actually recognize you are the experts of your children. You are the experts of your family, and your intuition is filled with wisdom. So listen to it. If something is niggling in there that says, this doesn't feel right, or this doesn't seem right, or why is my child being more agitated or, defiant? What's going on? Why can't my kid focus um, on at school or at home? It may well be anxiety. There are so many different faces to anxiety, and sometimes we can jump to assumptions around the naughty child or the child that just can't focus and what's wrong with what's going on here. So yes, we do have to play a little bit of detective work. Oftentimes there is some anxiety element going on, and it is about saying you are worth listening in to your own needs as parents and doing something about it. Reaching out, connecting with others, and seeking out the practical tools that will make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's so important to remember. I think as a parent, none of us have gone to university to learn how to be a parent, but it's our most important role. And, I know that I've felt out of my depth so many times, and how valuable it is to just have that reminder. No, you know your children, you understand your children, listen to them, and then tap into your own wisdom, because you're right, no one knows them better than we do, and no one knows them better than they do. So being able to have those conversations together and believing in yourself as a parent, I think, is a really important tool in itself.
100%. And it's about validation, right? It's about acknowledging your own experiences and checking in on the voice within your mind about, are you being kind to yourself as parents and validating your experiences, because it is hard as parents. We don't have an A to Z guide, or actually there's a few guides out there now, but 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 it's a tough gig as parents, and we get it wrong over and over and over again, right? I'll put my hand up for that one. And it's about this continual, like, oh my goodness, what do I need to do now? And so the validation piece is really important. And because as parents, we always think, I've got to help my kids. I've got to help my kids. What can I do for my kids? And really, sometimes it's about thinking that those tools go both ways. So, yes, acknowledge your children's emotional experiences. Validating those emotional experiences are really helpful, and also making sure that you're doing it for yourself. And so it's, again, not suffering in silence, validating and moving into practical action for yourself and for your children is really part of this mental fitness toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last thing before I'm kind of move to the next question is just that, that distinction between feelings of anxiety that are a natural part of life. So feeling nervous about an exam, or feeling, nervous because there's some tension in a friendship at school. And then, supporting our children through those moments, but then recognizing, and I think the way you stated it was, if those feelings of anxiety or those, behavioral signs are existing for a prolonged period of time, so they're not going away, they're not getting better, it's time, then it's really time to potentially seek some more help. Is that the best, or is that one way to think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't necessarily want to wait too long because prevention is really powerful. So if those niggling kind of instinctual things that are going on that say, my kid is doing it tough right now, they're coming home, they're agitated, or they're sad, or they're withdrawn, or they're not sleeping well, we don't have to wait until it's an absolute disaster to seek help. It's because we can get in there quickly and equip kids and teens and yourselves. Because for me, a large part of the work that I do with the families that I work with is very much helping parents to feel empowered with the tools and building a consistent language for parents to work together at home on the tools to help. Ideally to make myself redundant as quickly as possible. And to enable that to happen is really helping parents as well as kids to be equipped with these practical tools. But don't feel like you have to wait until it's an absolute train wreck to seek out the help that you deserve. Just check in, follow your gut feel. But certainly, when kids are finding that they're just not quite themselves, these are definitely red flags to be able to listen to some of those somatic or tummy aches or headaches or muscle tension within our littlies as well. Or if they're more clingy, perhaps, or they don't want to let you go out at night, or separating more in a more tricky way when you're sending them off to daycare or kindy or whatever it might be, school. These things can be indicators that there's something going on under the surface. So listen out to those things. And yeah, kids have got pressured contexts at the moment. It's a really tough world out there. So we adopt a strength-based approach to this, and recognizing that when we can equip our children with tools from a young age to deal with some of the challenges of life in this really uncertain environment where there's the overwhelm of technology, there's that sense of compare and despair on social media that reinforces some of these feelings of not good enough. These are where we can present tools that will help our children. And if we think about even before kind of engaging others, there is the power of connecting with your children and opening up dialogue. So these are sort of where you can start to say, yes, I can do this. So yeah, potentially moving into some of those mental fitness tools, which may well be where you where you want to take the
No,
discussion.
I love that. And I think, we're really talking about, skills for life. When we talk about mental fitness skills, we're talking about skills that will hopefully equip our children and ourselves for the rest of our lives. And I think one area that we're so aligned in with at Gotcha4Life around that strengths-based approach, because I think what's really empowering to hear is that all of these challenges can be tackled with the right tools and the right support. And that's really, as a parent, that's really exciting to know. It's not like you need an operation or, with some other challenges that we may face in life. The great thing about working with our mental fitness is that there are tools that are evidence-based and have been shown time and time again to really be able to support. So, I think would love to know more from your perspective. We're thinking about building that mental fitness, building our emotional muscle. What skills can we as parents focus on in the home to really start to foster a sense of inner confidence and calm in our children?
Yeah, one of the most helpful is creating environments or opportunities to connect with our kids. And it is thinking about when those best times are in your day-to-day experiences. So it might be, tucking them into bed at night, reading a story. It might be going for a milkshake after school, or it might be any other times in the car, driving them to sport. Precious opportunities where you can have that quality engagement. And so thinking about how that might work in your household, because, every home is a little bit different, and also some of these fundamental similarities as well. So it's building out that action plan that works best in the dynamic and in the day-to-day routines that you have in your family. And then it is creating an environment where it's asking those open-ended questions. So asking is creating an opportunity to open up dialogue. Being really curious, having an inquiring mind around what's going on in your kids' lives. And I'm sure that everybody who has joined us today, you probably already do this really well, because the fact that you've jumped on this this connect means that you are already passionate about helping your children. So I would imagine that a lot of the stuff that we do talk about tonight, you're probably already doing really well. So power to you if you are. And, we can all lean into this. I can certainly lean into this also in my day-to-day with my kids. It's creating those opportunities to connect. And as parents, we like to fix, right? We like to be problem solvers. And because we want to take our children's pain away, right? I'm sure, Belle, you're a very practical, action-oriented human being. How do you go with some of this? Do you just want to kind of take their pain away and get to the outcomes quickly? How does this sort of play out in your home environment?
Well, look, I continually apologize to my eldest because I feel like I'm practicing everything with him, and by my third, he's got a much more balanced, capable mum, because I've made all the mistakes with my poor eldest and middle son. But I think, working in this space and having connection as one of our core protective factors, it is something that I really do work hard to do. And I recognize in our busy lives how hard it actually can be. So we know it, we understand it, we know the importance of connection. But then when you've been working or caring for younger children, and you've got kids coming and going from sports practice and music practice and homework and all the things we're juggling, how we still must prioritize those moments of connection, because if we don't, we get through the day and before we know it, it's the end of the day, we're exhausted. We haven't had those moments of true connection. But one thing that I think, has been something that I've learned is actually how quickly those bonds can be built. So you don't need to have half an hour one-on-one time. In as little as 5 minutes, we can really connect. And I think by giving them our absolute attention physically, if your children like that, physically connecting with them and just being there to listen to them and asking them. And it may take 2 or 3 questions, because I do get a lot of eye rolls, usually from the teenagers. But just sitting and letting them open up. And also a big learning for me is doing it on my own time. I'm doing it on their time, not my own time. So one of my boys, usually when he opens up, is just when he's being tucked into bed. When I have very little emotional energy left in my bank account, but that's when it really works for him. And so I've learned that I've got to leave some in the tank for him, because that's where he'll start to open up, and it'll just be, just before he's about to nod off. And that's where he really shares what's going on for him.
100%. I've got goosebumps to hear you say that, because that's exquisite. That's exactly what we want. And it's, I do a lot of work with corporate leaders, with CEOs and people, and such as yourself, Belle, people who are really, really busy, but want to give everything to everyone, right? And very dedicated. And a lot of the things that we do in a corporate context translate a lot to parenting, and vice versa. It's about recognizing, as you so beautifully highlight, it's quality trumps quantity. Quality is what matters. So if you have 2 minutes to, like what I typically say is listen with both ears, right? Um, that is powerful. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of quality, dedicated, mindful engagement. Mindful simply meaning being in the present moment intentionally and non-judgmentally. And being kind to yourself, once again, not thinking about, oh my goodness, I have to have the answers or I have to make sure I'm doing this right. It's actually taking a step back and thinking about your primary goal is non-judgmental, intentional connection. And being child-centered, as you also highlighted, is listening rather than thinking about, I need to tell, I need to teach, I need to do the right thing. So this is the essence of emotional validation. It's listening, it's leaning in, it's asking those open-ended questions, and then it's validating. So step one is acknowledging the emotions or acknowledging the experiences. Being curious, again, that beautiful mindfulness quality is that childlike curiosity. Wow, that sounds super interesting. Oh my gosh, that must have been really tough. Well done to you for being there for your mate, or they're just these beautiful, authentic, emotional validation and reinforcement around the things that you want to reinforce. And then asking the open-ended questions. So let's say there was a dilemma that they might have been going through, and you can validate for that dilemma. Wow, that sounds really tough. Sounds like you were there for your friend. I'm so proud of you for being there. What do you think you might be able to do to be able to look after yourself through that? Because that's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. Oftentimes empathic kids, they get a lot of stuff thrown at them about actually supporting other kids in the playground, and that's a weight on their shoulders as well. And so you're empowering them, you're delivering the message you believe in their ability to come up with solutions for themselves. And that's a really wonderful key message that enables them to build their emotional intelligence, which is a tool, which is a skill that is built through this sort of dialogue. And they might say, you know what, I really don't want to talk about this right now. I'm exhausted. Mum, just leave me alone right now. And so it's kind of right, respectful engagement. And or they might say, I have no idea. What do you think? And that's a really beautiful invitation for collaboration around problem solving. So this is one area that can require practice. It's testing and learning. Sometimes they'll say, just leave me alone, right? Or if one of your kids is in an emotional kind of state, and it's the door slams and it's the go aways and all of that, and it's the, oh, I hate yous, or what do you know? We get all of this, right, as parents, yeah. And they might say, I hate you. And that's kind of an opportunity to say, well, I love you. Well, I love you. I'm here for you. I'm here for you whenever you need it. And it's just the message is delivered. And these are so, so very powerful to deliver that message that I am your safe space unconditionally.
Yeah, I think that that idea of, there's nothing you can say to me that will make me love you less. I am always here no matter what. And there's no worry or problem too big or too small for us to figure out together. I think that idea that, just creating that sense of safety so that when they are ready, they know that there'll be no judgment when they
100%. No judgment is so powerful. And, they might be judging themselves, right? And this is what can happen if a kid is anxious. There may well be a lot of that critical voice going on. And if a child is quite high on self-judgment, judgment is what they are what's called hypervigilant, hypersensitive to, because they're so caught up in self-judgment that they may also jump to assumptions that you as a parent are judging them. This is also playing out in the playground, a worry story about fear of being judged. And so again, it's that, we talk about our children having Teflon armor, those words, and that the stuff that might go on in the playground as well. We as parents, Teflon armor, Teflon armor, and those words to slide right off, because ultimately it's not about us as parents. It's about us being there as safety. And yes, right, we are not pin cushions as parents. That's really important to recognize that we have feelings too, and we have the right to take ourselves away, to give space, not from a sort of abandonment perspective. We don't want to deliver the message that we don't care. But it's sometimes, if our child is in these escalated emotional states, it is about saying, right, I'm here for you. I love you. I'm here unconditionally. And let's regroup at a time where we can, have a chat about this when you're ready. Because, I'm sure if we talk to the neuroscience of this, as probably we're all quite familiar with this now, in terms of education around the fight or flight reaction, we have these mutually exclusive parts of the brain, and our children do as well. The prefrontal cortex, or that rational mind, kind of becomes a little bit inaccessible if we're being overtaken by the emotional mind. And so the validation piece, checking in on the emotions, actually calms down that amygdala hijack part of the brain. So validation before problem solving. Validation enables this rational mind to open up to then engage in some of the problem solving strategies that can be very helpful, because we want to help our children to move out of worry into a problem solving and action planning space. But we also want to recognize that that might just be, choosing time to engage, and recognizing when it's time to just give space, right? For your own mental health and well-being, as well as our children. We're not robots as parents. And part of the mental fitness toolkit for helping our kids and teens is very much helping yourselves as parents and looking after yourself, because you are worthy of looking after yourself for yourselves. We as loving parents kind of say, well, we want to look after ourselves in order to be the best parents that we can be, or in order to be the best leaders that we can be in a work context as well. Let's stand up to that message and say, we want to look after ourselves because we are worthy of self-care, and recognize self-care is not selfish. It is your human right as parents to, a lot of the strategies, again, mental fitness tools for our kids. We want to be role models of resilience by demonstrating self-respect, and we are engaging in these tools for mental health or mental fitness and well-being because, hey, we want to flourish in life as well, and we are all worthy as human beings. These are wonderful, powerful messages to deliver to your children. And in terms of that sort of dedication to helping our kids, let's also recognize kids will be barometers of the energy that we give out as parents. So if we're in stress, if we're in our own overwhelm and anxiety, kids will bounce off that with stress, overwhelm, and anxiety. They are so, especially if we have got a tendency to experience anxiety, that is that deep sense of empathy, they will be highly attuned to the emotions that you're experiencing as parents. If there's conflict in the home, as an example, to do your very best. Again, I recognize we're not robots as parents, we are imperfect as human beings. To the best of your ability, if you can take some of that dialogue offline away from your children, because they will absorb like sponges. So these are some of the things to keep in mind. We could have a 6-hour conversation. I think that we'd just be talking and talking and talking. There's so much that I would absolutely love to share with our community.
Yeah, I think, gosh, there's so much there. And I wish I had my notebook here because I would have been writing down all these notes. But even just that reminder of, the Teflon armor, particularly as our kids get older, I feel like, with teenagers, having that armor ready is really important, and recognizing that is, that's what I need to put on in order to be able to be the parent that I want to be. And, I'm also reminded of there's nothing wrong with having a reset. When you feel like you're reacting to your child's anxiety or worries or behavior, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, we're both feeling lots of emotions right now. How about we have a reset and come back to this?
Yes. And to that point as well, we're both feeling a lot of emotions right now, and that's okay, right? Emotions are okay. It's part of who we are. So permission to feel is tremendously important, as you and us. So, it's one of the key messages for Gotcha4Life is emotions are part of who we are, and let's connect around those emotions rather than disengage on those emotions. But to your point, yes, there will be a time and place where if we want to move into problem solving, then perhaps if we're in these heightened states of emotion, that's certainly not necessarily the time to do this. Around this piece of emotion, being an emotion coach as a parent is such an important role that we have as parents, to give permission to feel, to build a language around emotions, helps with emotional regulation, to recognize that we don't have to squash those emotions, because what typically happens when we squash the emotions is we get this volcano erupting of emotions. So we want to help to guide our children to teach a language around emotions, to help to recognize that feelings go up and down gradually. And so building conversation around feelings is powerful and helpful in our mental fitness toolkit. And also thinking about, what does it mean to be a role model of resilience? So we want to help our children to say, being a role model of resilience is allowing you to be imperfect, right? And building conversation around what a growth mindset is, about being comfortable in imperfection, focusing on effort, not just on outcome, recognizing that it is okay to not be okay, and then continuing the dialogue to say, right, we're feeling a bit ick right now, or whatever word you want to use. We're feeling a little bit not so great or sad, or talking about our own stories of, I had a tough day. And you know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to go for a walk around the block, because I know that walking helps me to just bring those stress levels back down, and to help to reinstate that sense of calm. And it might be, shall we go for a walk together? Or, walking is another beautiful opportunity to connect. Or it might be just using that sense of being a role model of resilience and saying, when I was feeling pretty stressed today, and so I know that when I'm feeling stressed, exercise really helps me, or just moving, or just getting out in nature, or doing something else. And then you can say, when you don't feel so great, what helps you? What are some of the things that you can put in your feel good toolkit, in your box of kind of go-to strategies to help you to feel a little bit happier, a little bit more peaceful?
I really, really like that. Yes, I would love to practice more of that at home as well. And just like hearing you talk through that, you can just see we are, everything we do, we are being, we're modeling for our children. So just to be able to share a little bit of that, that learning that we're going through ourselves will start to, have a really positive impact on our kids. Um, Jodie, I'm just going to pick up on a couple of the questions that are coming through on the chat because I think it's a really important topic. And, I know with my own children, there's different levels of neurodiversity with my kids. And, therefore there's no one set way to tackle these challenges because, we absolutely are tuning into our children. And, one of the questions that's come through is, what's the advice, or is there any different advice for parents with children who are neurodiverse? And in particular, children who have ADHD, who feel a lot of anxiety. Do you have any specific advice, to really support when our children are, working with their neurodiverse, incredible brains?
Yes, the power of neurodiversity and the challenge of neurodiversity. And, as I evolve in life, as a professional and as a parent, I just kind of feel like there's neurodiversity is so, it really should be mainstream. I know that some people really experience very challenging things because when we're talking about neurodiversity and when we're talking about human experience, we are on this spectrum, right? Mild, moderate, severe. And then there are so we talk about the quantitative differences and the qualitative differences. So we certainly don't want to dilute the intensity of where people are experiencing these experiences to a level of severity that it is causing that prolonged fear, suffering, and avoidance, or the deep challenges. However, what I really want people to do is just recognize that anxiety is neurodiversity. ADHD is neurodiversity, ASD is neurodiversity, and there's so much of the complexity that we experience in life. So we really deeply want to destigmatize and smash any sense of shame in that space. Bringing it back to the question around how to help with ADHD or with some of the let's say sensitivities. I hate the word sensitive, right? But this is kind of a technical or a clinical term. It's full respect to your child's needs. And so it's thinking about what are the triggers? What are the triggers, and what might be the situational triggers, the cognitive triggers, the worry thoughts that are going on, and also the self-imposed shame that can escalate, such as I'm not good enough because I experience these sorts of things. So it's disentangling the fact that there may well be this overlay of anxiety, or it may well be OCD as well, or obsessive compulsive traits that sometimes go comorbid or side by side with ADHD, or it might be anxiety or OCD kind of experiences in and of itself, or it might be giftedness that can lead to some of these challenges that are going on from a neurodiverse perspective. So helping to manage the anxiety is part of the picture, really building up a conceptualization. So the mind strength method, which is the methodology that I've developed that helps adults, kids, and teens, first step in this is awareness. All right, so awareness of what are those fight or flight driven thoughts, feelings, and actions. What is the picture that is going on for your child? No matter what are the triggers that put our children into a state of stress or a state of distress? And then building full respect to your child's experiences. And then moving into a place of practical tools. How to help our children, first of all, build self-acceptance and self-love. So taking away that sense of I'm not good enough because, really empowering your children to be proud of who they are. And moving in, so acceptance is a superpower, acceptance of who we are and loving ourselves for who we are. And then moving into helping to take our kids out of that sympathetic nervous system that goes along with all of these experiences. Because remember, whether it's ADHD or whether it's ASD or any of the above, OCD, the sympathetic nervous system will be part of the picture. And so it's breathing strategies, long, slow out breath. It doesn't have to be deep breathing. In fact, deep breathing doesn't necessarily help when we're in a heightened state of emotion. It's just really the power of the long, slow out breath. You know, they might like hot chocolate, so you can help with visualization around cooling down a cup of hot chocolate, building in a pause between the situation and how we respond to that situation, using these sorts of tools to create that space between situation and response. These are some of the things that can happen. Learning how to stand up to those worry stories. Sometimes tactile things can be tremendously helpful depending on what the nature of neurodiversity that's going on. So is there anything tactile? You know, there's so much within the realm of comorbidity within our kids that sometimes putting a diagnostic box can be helpful to some degree because it helps to for us to say, okay, that's what that was. That's why these sorts of things are going on. So diagnosis can certainly be helpful to build a greater understanding around some of the complexities. And then it's taking a step back from diagnosis. And because the comorbidity that can help across all of these situations can be very helpful as well. So sometimes leaning into that diagnostic category and sometimes taking a step out of that can be helpful as well.
Thanks, Jodie. And we're getting very close to our finish time, but I'd love to finish with one more question. And that's, you know, at Gotcha4Life, one of the protective factors that we really work hard to, I guess, support people to build. So, you know, be that our young children, all the way through to the work we do with adults, is the ability to recognize when you can benefit from help. So that the idea of our help-seeking muscle. What advice do you have for parents who are, you know, looking to support their children who might be more closed off to opening up about what's going on for them, or might be refusing to talk to a professional or to somebody else? What advice would you share to help support our children, I guess, to be more open to receiving and asking for help?
Yeah, a really beautiful question. So, helping to understand, I suppose, these when worry is taking hold, and standing up to some of those worry thoughts, and sort of again normalizing some of these things. So saying this is normal, this is part of our normal human experience. That helps to kind of take that sense of defensiveness around it out of the picture. And so I think that that is an important part of that. Belle, do you have some things that you have in mind in relation to that question?
Um, I think I think part of it goes back to what you were talking about earlier in that reassuring the safety, reassuring that there's nothing too big or small that we can talk about, that I'm here to support you no matter what. I think normalizing it is a really important one. And I know in our household, even my partner sharing some of his struggles around anxiety has really helped our kids be able to not be ashamed or, with feelings or worries that they might experience. So I think being vulnerable ourselves and sharing a bit more about ourselves, because our kids generally look up to us, and recognizing that this is something that so many of us struggle with can
Yes.
can sometimes be really helpful.
Yeah, 100%. And because sometimes we want to avoid instead of leaning in because we get concerned that maybe we'll say the wrong thing. And so I think it's about, as you say, it's giving permission to talk about this, to be um, comfortable in the discomfort. So when we have discomfort, we sort of feel like our brain wants to tell us, avoid the discomfort, avoid the discomfort. In essence, we lean into that and sit with the discomfort. And so what we're doing in that is being role models again to our children. I've just noticed in the chat somebody very kindly highlighting the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergent. Okay, so thank you for picking up on that and the terms. I'm really grateful for that beautiful call out. So, yeah, I think self-compassion is part of this as well. Saying, what can you do to be compassionate around this? And what can you do to jump into kindness for yourself, as opposed to necessarily talking to overt uh, dialogue around mental health topics? It's kind of, again, taking that broader lens to recognize the power of kindness, the power of doing nice things for ourselves, and those sorts of strategies, that whole well-being framework or well-being toolkit, talking about values, taking the dialogue, acknowledging worry as part of who we are, getting some distance from those worry stories, moving the dialogue into problem solving, and also moving the dialogue into talking about the things that we value as a family, and building a language around some of these things, talking to valuing connection, talking to valuing well-being, whatever else, having fun, values of fun, values of being silly, right? All of these sorts of things. It's whatever you value as a family, and building a dialogue around those as well is part of, it's certainly core to the mind strength method, and it's core to a mental fitness toolkit as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point around, how can we progress the conversation to move more towards solutions focus, to move more towards that end state. So whether it's refusal about, around going to school, or, wanting to avoid other things, I think there's a lovely opportunity sometimes to be able to move things onto what we do want versus what we don't want. And that can be really helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in moving the dialogue to what we do want, a strategy, a practical tool is called shaping desired behavior. And it's a tool that I use a lot when I'm working with the families at the anxiety clinic. It's about catching small representations of the things that we want to see more of in our kids. We use the same strategy. If there is avoidance, it might be looking at really small steps, because small steps, if a child is experiencing anxiety, that can be really, really hard for all of us, whether it's a kid or an adult. Every step is huge, and it's catching the good stuff in action. It's catching those desired behaviors, small representations, and really verbalizing it, even calling it out, providing a language, providing words around it, and recognizing it will reinforce it. It will make those sorts of things happen even more, just as another tool in that
Bonus.
mind strength toolkit, mental fitness toolkit.
Thank you, Jodie. Look, I could actually sit and ask you a million questions for the rest of this evening, because I just think there's so much gold in what you're saying. But we do need to finish up today's webinar. I feel like there's been, so many topics that we've, uncovered, and some really fantastic tools that you've shared. And I know that different tools will be resonating with different people. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you for sharing your time with us and all of your experience and what you've learned with working with so many families around Australia. So a huge thank you from all of us. We're so grateful to have you as part of the Gotcha4Life village and our team. And I wanted to say a big thank you to everybody who has been on the call this evening as well. So I know there was a lot covered. I know there were some questions we couldn't get to, and I do apologize for that. But please know that we will review all of your questions, and we will use those to help to design future webinars that we will share with our mentally fit schools parenting community. So please do stay in touch with us. We will be sharing a recording. I think it'll end up on the parent portal in our mental fitness gym as well. So Jodie, huge thanks, and look forward to working together. And I hope everyone has a really lovely evening.
Yeah, such a pleasure, such a pleasure. Yeah, please feel free if you've got questions, reach out, don't hesitate. I'm really happy to continue the conversation beyond the time that we have together today. It's always a pleasure to connect with people at any time. So yeah, lovely to chat tonight, Belle, and always a joy to support Gotcha4Life.
Thanks, Jodie. And we'll also include details of Jodie's organisation, the Anxiety Clinic, in the information that we send out, because as I mentioned before, Jodie and her team are specialists in this space and are available to work with children and families all over Australia. So thanks so much, everybody. And we look forward to working with you again soon.
Bye, everyone.